everybody. And so we can, at 5:04, officially start the meeting. We have a super quorum. And this is all of us except MJ, who is the planning department rep, and she is on vacation. So we'll do introductions. We were going to end with the new folks, so you could do a little bit of a more full introduction, but I'll start and then I'll call on people. And my name is George Tolimpsas. I'm the planning board rep to this committee. I'm the vice chair of this committee, and the chair has delegated me to facilitate these meetings. That's why I'm talking first. And so now I'll call on Hannah.
Thanks, George. I'm Hannah Reckshoffen. I'm the chair and member at large. And I'm very excited to see everyone.
And I'll go next to see on my screen, Tracy.
Yep. Hi, I'm Tracy Allen, and I'm member at large. Thanks.
Thank you. And Phil?
I'm the city council rep. That's it.
Thank you. And Jonah?
I'm Jonah Keene, member at large, and no longer the newest member on the committee.
Nice. Carol?
I'm Carol Collins, and I'm the Director of Energy and Sustainability for the City of Greenfield. I'm glad that George finally got to say super quorum. I have a feeling that's a first.
Right, nice. Thank you. Marlo?
Yes, Marlo Warner, your DPW director. Thank you.
Thank you. And Nancy?
Nancy Hazard, member at large.
Thank you very much. And I see you first in line here. Kim, why don't you give us, happy to have you here, welcome, and interested in hearing what brings you here and all that. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm Walter Kim Boas. I go by Kim, so please call me Kim. Walter is my father's name, and my mother always called me Kim, so that was my name. That's that story. I've been involved with energy and municipal government since about 1977. Originally with the city of Dayton, in which I parlayed a very brief stint into a 10-year job as the as I was called, the energy czar of Dayton. Really not much of a title, but I initiated a lot of community energy type efforts, as well as municipal energy conservation efforts during that time frame. Moved to Massachusetts in '86, working for the Commonwealth in their effort to begin more aggressive energy conservation in their state-owned buildings. Moved on to another job, moved out to the Valley, and moved to another job with a municipal organization called the Massachusetts Municipal Wholesale Electric Company, which was established by the Commonwealth to assist municipal utilities in the acquisition of electricity, building power plants, going into long-term power agreements. I was the odd man out, or odd person out. I was the energy conservation, energy efficiency person there for 26 years. During that time, I did residential energy conservation, ran a residential audit program, and eventually expanding that into rebates for appliances and energy retrofits, moving into commercial industrial programs, and just expanding the breadth and width of their energy services. In addition, I also was the head of the Energy Committee in Williamsburg for 10 years, and was involved with Solarize, did a 3-town Solarize, and got green community status for the town during that time. That's enough for me.
That's Excellent. That's funny. Excellent. I was noticing the reactions of Carol and Nancy, our two energy conservation geeks. I think they'd be proud to say. It sounds like some sounds like some great experience. Thank you so thank you so much. Greta, please.
You're telling me I have to follow that? I'm definitely way newer to the field of sustainability. I am currently the food service director for Greenfield schools, coming from Chicopee Public Schools, where I was the farm to school coordinator. And then prior to that, I was a food corps service member. So work directly with students doing hands-on gardening, cooking activities. I am no longer have farm to school as my sole focus, but I'm always very committed to sourcing food from local farms. I've been working with Amy Donovan to try to bring back composting, so there's talks in the schools to try to bring composting back post-pandemic. So just doing what I can in the schools and in my program, to be sustainable. And I'm new to the city of Greenfield. I actually am a resident of East Hampton. But I love the idea of being involved in the city, and I'm excited to participate.
Excellent. Thank you. And I know that, you're talking about the amount of time you've been involved and stuff like that, but we're, broad representation on the committee, whether it's a, generational thing or stuff like that, it's very valuable. And I also want to note that you are, you have a particular designation on this committee. You meet one of the requirements for I can't remember what technically it's called. Carol, I know you would focus on this when you were seeking out, go ahead, don't you?
Of course, you got me when I'm chewing.
Oh, it's youth.
The student representative,
yeah,
or representative from a student affiliated,
Thank
something
you.
that actually works. And I love your background, Greta. You look like you're in the Grand Budapest Hotel.
Huh, this is my living room. You didn't see my house plant. Come on.
Oh, beautiful. Next meeting's at Greta's house.
And that's great, because that's been a slot that we had actually a high school student in for a bit, but it's been a slot that's been mostly vacant. So very glad to have you in that regard.
Yeah, and I love working with students, and would love a good excuse to talk to students. So if there's ever something that you want me to kind of organize a group of students on, I'd be happy to do that.
Food for thought, no pun intended. Thank you. Great. Welcome to you guys, and it sounds like it's nice, Jonah, not to be the newest person. So the next agenda item is approval of minutes. There were actually a couple. It's been a while since we had met, so we lost track a little bit. But and I again apologize, as I did electronically, for the minutes coming out so late. And I know you new guys, I don't know if you'd had a chance to read them, and I hope the veteran folks have had a chance at least to feel able to vote on them. So if that is the case, I'm open to a motion about the April meeting minutes.
So
is that moved? And anybody second?
Second.
Thank you. And is there any discussion about those very dense, very detailed April minutes?
May I apologize again?
I want to thank you for those, because
Yeah.
I really, they were really helpful to me in reviewing. There was just a lot of
Yeah.
material at that meeting, and it was
It was.
great
Thank
review.
I lost her.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you, George, for sifting through them.
Sure.
Organizing that.
And I'll just comment too that I saw no errors. Of course, I just edited them, but I did find the detail of it helpful in this regard. It's unusual for minutes to be that detailed, but this is such an essential topic, and it's such a complex topic. It did seem helpful to have a record of that very rich, discussion that we had. So, are there any other discussion or any errors anyone saw or corrections needed? Seeing none, and Phil, were you asking for a roll call vote, or just you wanted to get the names of everybody who was here? You're muted, sorry, man.
I don't need a roll call. I can see everybody's name.
That's what I thought. Okay, great. Thank you. And Phil, you should mention, you didn't say it, I don't think you're the clerk as well of the
I'm
committee.
the clerk. I'm taking notes today, not as dense as Hannah's. I do them on the fly. I don't listen to the tape.
Very nice. So again, just for, especially for new folks, you're welcome to abstain if that is the most appropriate. So all in favor of the April minutes, approving them? Please just raise your hands. Great. Marlo, are you not yet? Okay. And Phil, you know your own vote. Okay. Any against?
I'm gonna abstain because I was.
Okay. Very good. Any against or Marlo, you're
abstaining. I wasn't present.
Got it. So two abstentions, it looks like. Great. Thank you. And next is the June minutes. Is there a motion to approve? I see Hannah, yes, and Phil second. Great. And is there any comment on those minutes? I have a few just minor corrections on the first page. Jonah's last name was spelled with K-E-E-N, it's K-E-A-N-E. As far as the guests from the CPC, Thomas Garino is the Greenfield Housing Authority Director. It said Housing Chair, so just want to specify that. And lastly, on that committee, he's the CPC Vice Chair, was not just a member of the committee. And one other thing on the bottom of page 2, when it mentions when they were going to have a public hearing, it says John Son, S-O-N, and Z-O-N. So just a typo.
George?
Yes, Phil.
Can I just make a note of those corrections, or do I have to go back and change them in the minutes?
I think you can just make a note of it in this. I think that should be fine.
Good. Okay, thanks.
Sure. Any objection to those edits? Seeing none. All in favor of approving with those amendments? And Kim, that's a yes. Okay. And yes. Okay. And are there any? Oh, Carol, you're asking a question, or you're just waving your?
Well, I'm not checking, but I'm pretty sure John Zahn is Z-O-N-N, but it's nitpicky. No? No two N's? Okay.
No, single N.
That's why I always say JZCC.
There was only one spelling error in that, not two.
And I'm guessing there are no votes against this, but who was abstaining?
I wasn't there. Abstaining.
Jonah, Marlo are abstaining.
Abstain. Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Thank you guys very much. Next is actually a download or comments on the, we didn't meet as a committee last month. We had obviously that in June, the presentation of the Community Preservation Committee, and then they were at the same time we would have had our July meeting, they were doing their public hearing. And so Hannah was just suggesting we do a little bit of reflection on that. I attended in person. I'm not sure if anyone else on the committee was there. Sorry, you were, Trace. Okay. Sorry, thanks. And Nancy, you were remote, I think, participating. So
Zoom and
gotcha. So so that's why it has my and Nancy's names there. Sorry, Tracy, I didn't. I wasn't sure you were there. So I'll just start off with a couple of comments, and then Nancy, and then Tracy, if you want to chime in. Just for people who aren't, if anyone's not familiar, especially Greta and Kim, if you're not familiar with the Community Preservation Act, it's something that each community has to approve. And Greenfield, to the pleasant surprise of some of us, did approve that. The voters did approve that a couple years ago, I guess. And so this committee has the task of organizing how those funds that are used, derived from that, will be spent, or at least framing it. It's ultimately the decision of the city council what projects are approved. And the four categories are housing, open space, recreation, and historic preservation. And so I'll just briefly mention that the three big takeaways I had from this is that the proposals and the projects are community driven. The committee doesn't create these things. The committee works with people who bring forth proposals, and they vet them, and they make recommendations to the city council about that. The second thing I was struck by is that the timeline is kind of pressing for people to do that, because the deadline for pre-applications, which can be pretty, I think, non-specific from how they describe them, is September 30th. But then in September, October, the committee meets with applicants to discuss the pre-applications. But then the full application is due by November 31st. And then there's a process by which they're considered and potentially approved by mid next year. So it's not a lot of time. I mean, it's just over a month till those pre-applications have to be in. So that struck me too. And lastly, I was just struck that one of the goals of the master plan was passage of the Community Preservation Act. And now that it's there, it seems like such a potential tool for accomplishing additional goals that are in the master plan. Just this synergy just was striking to me. So Nancy, it looked like you were chewing, but I'm done with my, if you want to go, or Tracy, whichever. If you have things to contribute about that public hearing.
I just was struck by the involvement and commitment of the committee, that they were putting a lot of effort into doing it right, and just seems like a really good opportunity. If we have some ideas to put something forward for them. That's all I got.
No, thanks. Yeah, it's been a big commitment on their part. Mm-hmm. And Nancy, did you have anything you want to share about your impressions? You're muted. There you go. Thanks.
The space bar is supposed to unmute me, but it doesn't always work. Okay. I was struck about the two things that you mentioned, George, but also just how much community participation there was, how much sort of excitement, I'm going to say, about this. You know, and now I think people really understanding that how community driven it is. And there were a bunch of ideas that came forward, and people also talked about, you know, in terms of forming proposals, the idea of people partnering on, you know, a particular idea that was put out there, jump on and really create a movement on a particular project. So I'm excited about it.
Yeah, it almost seems to be a good segue to the next agenda item about the development of the master plan. And one of the things that were so compelling about that was the extent of enthusiastic public participation. Yes, Hannah, I saw your hand.
Sorry, really quick. George, when did you say the full application was due?
The end of November 31st.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other comments or questions about that? Jonah?
Well, just to, comment that, I mean, a huge fan, obviously, as a open space advocate, a huge fan of this. And I'm curious, I know when I've worked on it, you know, we use these across the state with Mass Audubon. We work with towns on the use of these funds. And I'm curious if we have traditionally partnered with Mount, I know both Mount Grace and Franklin land trust consider Greenfield their part of their terrain. Have we traditionally partnered with both of them, or?
Yeah, I don't really know the answer. It looks like Nancy, please.
Yes.
Yeah, Mount Grace, well, there was a representative from Mount Grace who came to the CPC meeting, which
That's
they
right.
were one of the leaders for creating the community farm, getting the land for the community farm. And as far as the Franklin Land Trust goes, they've been participating with the city on tree planting. They're the ones that brought the tree grant to town. So, and there might be other examples, but those are just two that I know of.
Yeah, great. Yes, I mean, it seems like discussing with them as far as future open space plans, working with them makes a lot of sense. Because that's the strongest proposal to put together is a some type of multi-partner proposal. I was sorry, I was out of town. I was sorry to miss it.
Yeah, well, it is, I believe, available on GCTV.
Great.
And it is striking how quick people have to move on this. From when it was first essentially announced at this public hearing. So, I think Carol, you had your hand up, then I'll come back to Nancy. Did you, Carol? No. Okay, Nancy, please.
George, you brought up the whole idea of your dream of connecting Greenfield to Deerfield in terms of bike paths,
yeah,
which I thought was great. And I sent you an email. You never got back to me, but
I did get it. Thank you.
Someone told me that there's actually a group that's working on that. Do you know anything about that? I haven't been able to figure out who those people are. Does anybody know? No, maybe just a rumor.
Just to be clear, what I was.
Yeah, I'm curious about it, and I think that's the kind of project that the Mount Grace people would be interested in working on. So,
Phil.
I forget his name, but the guy who's the chair of the historical commission spoke to me about his fantasy of putting a bike path under the bridge that connects that connects us to Deerfield, and that would be a way. That's the hardest part of that bike path, which is sharing that bridge with cars. Anyway, he might be part of a group that's thinking about that.
Are you talking about the bridge at the town line?
Yeah, that goes over the Deerfield.
Sure.
It goes over the Green River before it connects. No, it goes over the Deerfield.
Yeah. And to be honest, having biked that, I mean, I used to bike commute to Northampton. Having biked that hundreds and hundreds of times, that to me is not the issue. The issue is the 3 miles beyond that, south of that, to the entrance to Old Deerfield. And that's what I'm comfortable biking, but a lot of people wouldn't be, and a lot, I wouldn't want to take a kid there. But once you get to Old Deerfield, there's such wonderful routes that you can connect with, and for commuting, tourism, recreation. And so the vision was somehow you got to get across the water. That's the big tough thing. But I've biked from Old Deerfield north up those, the roads through the fields, the dirt roads. It goes quite a ways. So, it'd be obviously a complex thing about a river crossing and other things, and getting permission from private property. But it's great to hear, Nancy, there might be someone, already thinking of that. Yes, Phil.
I was just going to say the bridge is so much easier to get across now that the DPW has fixed it. We have nice wide bike lanes.
Yes, agreed. Any other, got a couple more minutes if needed on that topic of the community preservation? Yes, Phil.
I missed the meeting too, but I had a follow-up conversation with the guy who spoke to us. I'm blanking out on his name. I thought that he was going to be dismissive about any plans of helping that poor Highland Park pond. But he said, don't give up on dredging. He pointed me to a town that had done that had accomplished it with a smaller body of water. And he also suggested 2 methods of doing something about the duckweed that has now totally covered the pond. One of them is an artificial island. It's not artificial, it's plants that are plopped in the middle of the pond and somehow suck up the nitrates. I'm not sure how it works, but he thought that that was an encouraging possibility for the pond, and I'd like to pull that together as a proposal, and I'm feeling the heat of those deadlines. We don't have much time.
Yes, Tracy.
I've been thinking a lot about how we would go about supporting residents in living more sustainably within the town by pulling together resources or offering workshops, maybe websites or programs, and just giving the people in Greenfield support in trying to live more sustainably. I don't know if Green and Greenfield already offers that kind of support, or if that's something that we could jump in and supplement just for the regular folks of Greenfield. Like, how do I go about starting, putting solar panels on my house, or how do I compost, or, any number of things, bike connections to bike paths. And there's so many things out there, and a lot of people just don't know how to get started or where to look for information. Is there anything we can do to support the people? That was what I was thinking.
As some kind of a CPC project, you mean?
Yeah, maybe start a website or
Right.
or develop some programs or something of that nature.
Yes, Kim.
So I live right across the street from Temple Woods, and use those trails a lot, and have noticed how degraded they are, and especially after last summer's rainstorms, that even the main trail is getting ruts in it, and every big monsoon type rain we have, it's only going to get worse and worse. So my hope is that something from the Preservation Act funds goes to either developing a plan or actually starting work on doing some very basic maintenance on those trails.
Hannah, and then Nancy.
Just around the application, are all applications submitted by community members, and do community members need to include either partnerships or suggestions of organizations? Like, what's the level of the application process as far as feasibility, executability? Like, is that part of it? And it's just my total ignorance of this kind of application.
I didn't see the pre-application. My sense was that was not super, didn't have to be super formal or super refined.
Okay.
Is that your impression too, Nancy and Tracy, that it was just kind of get the ball rolling kind of thing? And certainly the more you could have to support it with, if there are partnerships or, particular resources, things like that. But it sounds like that is one thing the committee would do, try to work with people to try to,
okay. That's, yeah, got it.
But that is the tricky thing, like the things Tracy or the things Kim were mentioning. Who's going to start? It would be great if that happened, but who's going to take the initiative to, get that ball rolling and then see if there are other things? And I know when I did get your email, Nancy, and actually one of the members of the committee came up to me after the meeting ended and suggested someone I contact in another part of the state who had done something that was kind of a crosstown kind of thing. That does spur you on to say, oh, maybe I should look into this a little bit more. So, and I'll just, as far as that goes, while I have the mic, I was going to get back to you, Han, about the person who's the new chair of the Chamber of Commerce, Jesse Dean, because they're based in Old Deerfield. So just trying to get some synergy and maybe some, some momentum or something like that, or a critical mass of interest and resources potentially. So
yeah, and I was thinking that she would be a really good person, I think, to be a guest speaker to our committee. And I was going to ask if, looking out to September, October, probably, is it August? So right now, yeah, August, September, maybe in October, because for the next meeting, I'd like to do the second half of what we're going to talk about tonight. But yeah, I think she's someone that we should definitely talk to, because as the head of the chamber, she's very plugged into a lot of the things that we're going to want to do. Biking is certainly commuting, and it's also tourism. So
I would just, I guess, kind of to wrap up this item, I would just say this committee is very invested in a lot of these types of things happening. Some of us have our own initiatives, and if anyone, like I say, Nancy reaching out to me, said, "Oh, okay, maybe I should do more on this." And so, if anyone wants to, here's anything they want to, talk in between, because our next meeting isn't until just before the deadline for the pre-application. But I would encourage us to be in touch with each other if we hear more, anything like that, or get so inspired. Carol.
I just wanted to I don't know, in my experience, I love to see what's already been done. And so I know when it was Travis and I forget the other gentleman's name who gave the presentation.
Thomas.
Yep. That there's meticulous records around the CPA and all the projects that have been done. So I think a lot of time could be saved by just sifting through that and finding things that kind of align, which I'm sure there are, and that might be a really good way to kind of beef up or kind of round out some type of idea. And then I guess the other thing I'm sorry.
You meant things that had been done in other communities in the past. Correct. Under the CPA.
It'll show all the projects that have been approved.
Got it. Thank you.
I know I read it in the paper every year, like what each community is doing.
Gotcha.
It's some great stuff. So it's again, linking up with the land trusts, that's been done many times. So just seeing what kind of projects, I don't know. I just think it's very helpful. But the other pieces, I know we talked a little bit about like a top 10 list of things from the master plan, but are you thinking that's just not timely or not feasible given the deadline? Or I don't know if you wanted to address that.
Were you addressing one of us in particular, or just the committee generally?
George.
Oh, me. I don't know. I mean, I saw your note about a top 10 list in the email earlier. I'm not sure if that's something we already have, or that's something you were just speculating about. But so I don't know. It seemed like us collectively trying to see if there's any things we would want to champion and try to go forward with them. Yes, Hannah.
I will say that had been somewhat my thought about what could be part of our meeting in September, and now seeing the deadlines around things, I don't know exactly how to still do that, but I agree and think that pulling out some highlighted projects and or seeing what projects get submitted and supporting the process of their execution on the other side, I think is also something that this committee could be effective at. If we're not sort of able to jump in and come up with priorities before applications have to be in or pre-applications have to be in.
Nancy? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think there's time, because the pre-application is not a requirement for the application, first of all.
Oh, really?
Okay.
And that's my understanding. People might move it forward to find a partner or that sort of thing. But could I be wrong? Am I wrong about that, George?
Well, I'm looking at the project approval process in the materials that this was details. And well, it says September 30th, pre-applications due in parentheses and capitals required.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Okay. Well, the other idea, this would be extraordinarily short notification, but the other idea that came up during that public, or at some point, was that this committee actually or participate or help hold
Mhm.
community-wide to,
Nancy, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt.
I
You
don't know.
keep breaking up,
Like,
so maybe if you can turn off your video, it might be easier to hear.
thank you, Carol.
That's better already.
Did you want to repeat what you just said, Nancy? Something about poll or something? We couldn't get it.
We brought up the idea at the last meeting that the SGIC might play a role in actually
Well.
convening a town-wide, community meeting to get people together who want to discuss ideas
Mm.
before the pre-application process. And the timing obviously is extraordinarily tight. I mean, we
Right.
basically have to decide, yeah, we're gonna do it. Choose a date that's, 2 weeks from now or something, and just put it out there and do it. So,
Phil,
It does,
everybody. Yeah.
it does seem like maybe that ship has sailed. I'm not sure we have time to do that.
And Carol.
I would just also add that I would be careful about doing that without either coordinating with the CPA or getting their blessing or what they feel might be helpful, because the other thing that really impressed upon me was how much detail Travis and, again, I forgot his name, Thomas, had. And I just feel like we might not be as productive if
Right.
we're not the same type of experts to gather that information. But I do feel that, maybe there's some other role to just gather input, and that's all.
Hannah?
What happens between pre-application and application? Your pre-application has to be approved to submit an application, I'm guessing?
What is it? I can
yeah,
just read what it says. Is September, October is the CPC meets with applicants to discuss the status of their pre-application.
Okay.
So, and that can happen in September. So if someone gets in before the deadline, they could meet with people prior to that. And then that is leading up to the full application at the end of November.
Yeah. So I wonder if there's a role to play potentially in partnering with and or being in service to the CPC in support of applicants who are moving from pre-application to application, and say, the projects that are coming in that align with the master plan, we want to help those applications be successful, or we want to help all applications be successful, or whatever, however we would thread that needle. But it seems like maybe there's some, because people are going to need, I would imagine, to take their application to the next level, need to know somewhat of the organizational landscape. And I don't know, that could be a place to help supply information.
Yeah, I'll call myself, and that sounds like a great idea, because I think that with this being sudden, with the public hearing, which is required, happening in the summer, and so it's getting a fair amount of enthusiastic attention, but some people it's going to fly under the radar. It seems like in early September, having a refreshed announcement about here's this opportunity, here's this deadline, and maybe a joint press release of this committee and that committee, that we're kind of just, like you say, in support, and that so much of the work this involves resonates with the master plan. We're basically endorsing people looking into this, and trying to support that process. So just to flag it more, I think, and so that's my thought. Thanks, Phil. Nancy?
trying to turn myself off so I can hear talking. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, I would be happy. I was assuming that, of course, we wouldn't do anything without the CPC, but maybe another way of approaching it would be just to reach out to Travis, who's the chair of that,
Mhm.
to find out if they're intending to hold anything, but in the next 3 weeks or something, and if so, ask how we could support that.
Sounds great. Is there, let me ask, I know we got to wrap this up, but it is pressing because of the timeline. Is there any objection to Nancy's suggestion, which sounds like Hannah reaching out to Travis to see about coordinating our committee efforts? Is there, seeing no objection, we'll send Hannah off to do that.
That's awesome. I mean, this is exciting.
I do. Yeah, it is. So are you okay to, any last thoughts, or should we move on? So the next, oh, Carol, yes, sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to multitask and I just found the link to the database of CPA projects that you can
Oh,
search
sweet.
through. So I'm sending that to everyone. I'm trying to on my phone, not going well. But.
All right. Thank you very much. That's great. That's a great idea. Yeah, to brainstorm and see what's been successfully approved. So this next topic is part one of a general overview for our, particularly for our 4 newest members of the committee. And this is part one. We're looking at kind of the history of how the master plan got developed, approaches the committee has taken over the years to try to get our arms around this gargantuan tome and task that we have the responsibility to work on, and some of the successes. So Nancy and Carol and myself are the members of the committee with the longest tenure, and so we were kind of all going to pitch in, but Nancy was going to take the lead about the history. I'll start with the approaches, and Carol is going to start with the successes, and I'm sure everybody got the email she had sent out with an attachment with something relevant to that. So Nancy, you can take away part one.
Okay, so like in the beginnings, sort of do it pretty fast. So master plans have this sort of history or reputation of being put on the shelf after they've been written. And when the master plan was happening, I was on the committee, as was George and a couple other people in here. And I was chatting with Eric about the whole process, Eric Torog, the director of planning and development, and he talked about an experience in a previous job that he'd had, that the town had an implementation committee for their master plan. And that intrigued me. So we chatted about that, and the two of us worked together on sort of dreaming about, well, what would that implementation committee look like? What should it look like? And I had this idea that unlike other city committees that I had seen functioning or whatever, or in existence, it would be great to have both residents and staff have an equal voice and an equal vote. And there are no other committees like that in town. And it just seemed like it was really important, and the goal would be that to further better communications between staff people and residents, and have the information that we need and be able to have robust discussions. And and then I'll say one more thing. So the other thing about sort of getting started was that the complexity, the hugeness of the master plan, Sustainable Greenfield, was overwhelming. And most of the committees, most of the people in the committee when we start out weren't involved in creating it. So we spent a lot of time stumbling around trying to figure out how to move everything forward. So I'll turn it over to you guys.
Thanks. I'll add something, Carol, if that's okay. I just going a little bit further back, the development of the history of the master plan itself. I can't remember how many years, it was 20, 30 something years since the last town master plan. And it is technically a planning board document. And so the planning board initiates the process. And the chair at that time in 2012 was Roxanne Wiedegardner, who's now the mayor. And so she, in collaboration with Eric, worked on figuring out how to proceed with a master plan, and chose to do what was called a sustainable master plan. So it was something, it was a new development of doing one with that kind of lens to frame all aspects of the plan. And the advisory committee that Nancy mentioned that she and I were on, I think Nancy was the one person who was on all 7 subcommittees that matched each of the different chapters. But I think there were about 30 something members, and very active group. I know I was the chair of the transportation subcommittee, and we met many times. We had 8 people. We had full attendance at every meeting. It was just amazing the amount of commitment that people had to this process. And then we had some, I can't remember how many now, but a lot of public forums and of various kinds, a lot of involvement, a lot of input. So just from the history point of view, that was how that kind of evolved and came about. And I know both Eric and MJ, as she said, it was reflected in the minutes from April, I think, that was so impressed, as you were alluding to, Nancy, how active this master plan has been, how it's been kept alive, both by this committee, but also it's been referenced so many, countless times by members of the town employees and departments and city council and the mayor. So it's really been a really compelling document as the city has evolved. Carol, did you want to add anything about that part of this item, about the history?
Well, it's interesting. On another topic, I this week was looking back to the genesis of this committee and how it kind of evolved out of the Sustainable Advisory Committee that had been set up back in 2012, which I had kind of forgotten about, even though I was there for all of that too. So, Greenfield had this commitment to sustainability all along, and then the Sustainable Master Plan just further strengthened that and really was kind of groundbreaking for a community to initiate a process where sustainability was not just an add-on, but
right,
integrated with all of the chapters. And then I think I'm glad, George, you mentioned the part about how it has become so much part of the vernacular in Greenfield. Right. And I would say a large part of that, it definitely is very dynamic and part of each department, or the departments that are doing projects or interfacing with the public more always refer to the master plan with their projects, and it's always kind of a guiding force of we all try to make sure that what we're doing is going to further the mission or the goals of what we've been set out to do. So I think that's one of the reasons that it just stays alive so well. And every year, if you look in our budget book, which I'm sure everyone reads cover to cover, but each department talks about, and it was implemented about 5 years ago, I think, where we're supposed to talk about how our work supports the master plan. So that being, again, part of just the function of all departments, really, I hope Marlo's nodding, even though we can't see him, that I'm saying the right things, but that's my recollection and I'm sticking with it. There we go. And then we're not going to talk about accomplishments yet, right, George? This is
correct. That was the history portion. So Nancy, it sounds like you were done with that. So we'll move on to the approaches. So once we had this committee and we had this big, dense, rich master plan, what did we do? And as Nancy was saying, part of it was bringing people who hadn't been part of the development of the master plan up to speed. And I will say too that just again about the history. Again, it's a planning board document, but so it's if there's no other than the planning board approving it, there's nothing official needed. But it was we, as I said, the public outreach was vigorous and very thorough, and there was a desire to get both the city council and the mayor to support this, and there was a vote of the council endorsing it or something like that. though it wasn't a technical requirement. So just wanted to mention that too, just to frame the broad buy-in with this. So as far as I was thinking it through and about what we've done, the various ways, angles we tried to take to tackle this large task. And one thing we've done, and again, Carol and Nancy, please correct me or add in when I'm finished with this list. But one thing we've done is chapter deep dives, and that's often been someone who was had been very involved with a particular chapter or had a particular affinity for that chapter. So I've done a number of times regarding the transportation chapter. Kind of a related thing was updating the list of goals that have been achieved, and we've had different spreadsheets that have been of varying abilities to ease of access, I think, or of utilization, but and I'm not the best one to speak to those technical things, but you know, trying to keep a rolling list of achievements to recognize what has been accomplished within the goal, which obviously we'll get to next. Another thing, and so that's kind of like the chapter by chapter and looking at accomplishments. Another approach has been to scrutinize the implementation plan. That's at the end of the master plan, and that gives much more detail. It gives some of the implementation actions that aren't actually included in the chapters. The chapters have the goals, the strategies, and some implementation plans, you know, going down in size or fine tuning. And there are additional ones in the implementation plan, and each one is listed about who might be the lead entity, department, or planning board, or things like that. What is the estimated timeline? What is the estimated cost? And so going through that with that kind of lens and trying to see, oh, what are low-hanging fruit? What are things that might be accomplished more quickly or more affordably? Another has been being alert for what we've referred to as orphan items, goals or strategies or implementation actions, things that don't really have a natural home in one of the departments. Some things are obvious, you know, who's working on that, and some things are less so. And lastly, what occurred to me is what we did during the last meeting, and Hannah was referring to as well, having guest speakers, because that has really expanded the knowledge base of the committee members to understand these different topics. And so that's helped too to spur, you know, how can things move forward toward the goals in the plan. So those are the various kind of tacks we've taken that occurred to me. And Carol and Nancy, I don't know if you have additional ideas or reflections.
I always
Yes,
wait
Carol.
for Nancy to start, but
Okay, sure. Please go ahead, Carol. Yeah.
I don't have a lot to say in this, so Carol, please carry on.
well, I think, I mean, for me, just to kind of sum up, or what always sticks with me is that our task is to facilitate the implementation of the master plan. And those words are always kind of where I come back to, because we have spent an inordinate amount of time over the years, as George said, you know, this behemoth, or I forget what word you use, but just it, you know, there's a lot of moving pieces. But once we get there, when we're talking about the accomplishments, I have to say that every time I visit what's actually happened since this was adopted in 2014, it's really astounding. And again, I think it's because this has really been a living document in this community, and it's municipal, it's private citizens, it's other groups and agencies. It's just really comprehensive that there's been so much happening on so many fronts. So I'll stop there and we'll see what's next.
And Nancy, any other thoughts on that around the approaches?
No, carry on.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay, so successes or accomplishments. Carol, you were gonna kick that off.
So again, I just found out this morning that I was going to be talking about these. So I apologize for the late notice, and I don't know if everyone got, there's just a one pager, which sometimes it's good to make things short and sweet. And this was actually done by Lori, those of you who remember, and it was back in 2019 to kind of, again, try a different tact instead of having all these tables and spreadsheets and overwhelming documents, to just have something kind of short and sweet. So I quickly updated with the best of my knowledge from 2019 to today, accomplishments under each of the 7 chapters that are in the master plan. So, and again, I just, and I printed out a copy of the original from 2019 and the one that you all have, and it's just very impressive. Just in the last 3 years, we've additionally adopted PACE and had the first PACE project in the state, which is a fabulous commercial financing program run by Mass Development to enable clean energy upgrades to commercial properties. Very needed, and the Abercrombie building, which is a fabulous project. Couldn't have asked for something better. We're a municipal vulnerability preparedness program community, which is all about climate resilience. What else has happened? We now have 4 net zero ready buildings in the municipality, 2 already completed, 2 under construction. That in and of itself is just really impressive to tout. And we also have, again, I need Marlo's nodding or a thumbs up or something, but I believe we have a low impact development ordinance that was passed. That was, and what, oh, the Main Street redesign is underway. I know that's probably not the right term, but that's what I'm going to call it. But that again is looking at intermodal kind of reimagining what Main Street's going to look like, and that it's for all users, not just vehicles to get around. And so that's happening now. Greta, I tried to address some of what I understood for the schools, and I'm just very excited that you're doing what you're doing, and that the schools desperately need this kind of programming and someone at the helm who's got so much great energy and ideas. So I tried to, at Summer Eats program, that's new-ish. I threw that in there. Some of the things that were from 2019, I'm not sure if they're still in existence, like the downtown police office. I don't know if that's still a thing. And the FRTA expanded evening service, I'm sorry to say, but I feel like that's a discussion that has been constant for like the 30 years I've been in this field, and I give up trying to understand. But anyway, so this is just a good snapshot. Just, oh, the Community Preservation Act, that happened since 2019. And the no, that was already there. The accessory dwelling unit, which are like in-law apartments. Little contentious, shouldn't be, but there you go. And then Fisk Avenue is just such a wonderful project that I think for me kind of exemplifies how we should be approaching projects, and really trying to again, the buzzwords for anyone who works in the field of planning or community development and the like, energy sustainability, but is DEI is the new term, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And a huge discussion that I keep hearing about is getting people access to open spaces, and especially given this summer, oh my gosh, how brutal. And then, you know, it's just been, a lot of people are really suffering. So I don't know, Fisk Avenue just kind of exemplifies what's possible. And again, for I know many of you have heard over and over again, but you know, it started with a wall that needed to be replaced and turned into creating a gathering space that every time I go by, there's people in it. And it feels so instantly like accepted and utilized, and that's because it's a great solution. And I think that's kind of the level that I hope we're able to continue in. So that's my little blurb. But again, there've been just so many accomplishments, so many people working really hard. And again, stepping back, like as the implementation committee, we're facilitating that. So I sort of see as a support arm, or I think going back to doing, when we were doing outreach events or having public events, those tended to be very well received and really appreciated by the community. So I think by keeping this going, and some things evolve over time. We've talked about that in the past too, that it's 8 years ago, and so we're already over halfway through. Master plans are typically looked at as 10-year documents, but I don't think that anyone could have predicted, definitely not now, what would have been coming down the pike back in 2014. And you do the best you can with the knowledge you have at the time. But part of, I think, why we've also been so successful is that we kind of had that head start, and then we've been kind of responding to it and planning for the changes that have happened since.
Thank you so much, Carol. I'll chime in, Nancy, and then come to you. Of my perspective, and first, Carol, thank you very much. I know it was a last-minute delegation, and appreciate you taking it on, and appreciate you finding this one-pager and updating it. And I think this kind of exemplifies another function of this committee, is really promoting, advertising, cheerleading about the master plan, and presenting things in ways that are absorbable, digestible, both for people coming onto the committee, but also for members of the public, and they really exemplify this. And I'll tell you, I also, a couple things I'll highlight under the transportation rubric is the complete streets policy having been adopted, and also the FRTA does have still some expanded evening service. But another thing that has come up, and this was an interesting, when we worked on this as a subcommittee, the FRTA has no direct affiliation essentially with the government here, other than the board of directors. We have the person who serves on the board with the largest voting block, so to speak, because it's based on community size. And Eric Twarg is the current representative on the FRTA board. But it's not something. It almost feels like a public utility, but it's not. It's not a town entity. So, but just trying to work together with them, and actually I've served on a consumer committee there for over a decade now, and there's an access program that provides door-to-door service. It's a small fee compared to the current free fixed route because of COVID, but that has functioned for a number of months. I've mentioned it before in this committee, I believe, for a number of months on the weekends. This is the first time there have been weekend service in like 20-something years in this area. So again, another accomplishment. And I want to touch on, these are accomplishments. These are things that are done, but the amount of patience and persistence that's been needed. Fisk Ave, when was that design first created? So many years ago by the design school. Conway School of Design, the ADU, which you mentioned. The first attempt got a lot of negative reaction. The planning board withdrew the proposal. Then we came back, and eventually it passed. And the complete streets policy, that was actually something. It was a nice synergy of efforts. The Greenfield Bicycle Coalition, a non-governmental entity, put forward the draft. This committee approved it, tweaked it a bit, approved it, sent it to the city council, and it got approved. And that's been an essential thing for the transportation within how transportation works in the community. being multimodal and considering all users. So so yeah, I agree with you. The facilitation and also the promotion of things and getting additional public input and buy-in. So kind of ongoing. So that's what I have to offer as far as the successes or accomplishments. Nancy, any last thoughts on that?
Yeah, just a few, not many, because you guys did a fabulous job. Being an energy person that I am, I'll just toot, Carol's horn for her, the things that she didn't say. So, because Carol, you have to go back all the way to the 2014 when was Greenfield Light and Power created? Wasn't it after that? I don't remember the exact year.
It rolled out in January of 2015.
There you go. See, that is so absolutely huge.
Started in 2011.
Uh-huh. And then there's the money that's been saved and the incredible amount of work that was done to upgrade all of the municipal buildings, not just the ones that she mentioned that are new and that are zero energy, which is just phenomenally amazing. But the other ones are also phenomenally amazing, and a bunch of them have actually been taken off of fossil fuels altogether, like the town hall. I mean, that's just astounding. And the senior center also was built. That's one of the buildings that you mentioned that was built, but you didn't mention the senior center was dealing with mold and stuff for years and years and years and years. So we now have that, and of course the library is in process, which is amazing. And I would agree that a lot of our successes have been in the community, holding community events and getting people's input and creating good communication and goodwill and transparency and bringing just the whole feeling of the community working together with the staff, and as opposed to sort of a separation which sometimes can occur. There are a million other things, but those are the ones that jumped out at me that I wanted to add.
Thank you, Nancy. Yes, Carol.
I just wanted to add one more thing, which Georgia used the term cheerleader, and that was something I meant to mention, is that we are really the record keepers. And so one of the great roles we have by continuing to, if anyone looked, and I don't know what's active and what's not, but we do a progress report every year that we submit to the mayor, and that becomes a document that kind of gathers all of these pieces that are happening, and again, not just within the municipal government, but also with other agencies, and like there's the plastic bag ban and the styrofoam ban. So it's just another way to kind of keep it present for everyone, and I think that's really important, because otherwise, even though these things are happening, people don't know it unless we get the word out there and keep it visible.
Compost in schools. We had it for a few years, and Greta, I hope we're gonna get it back in there. That's a huge accomplishment, which hopefully we can really solidify in the next year or two.
Yes, Phil.
Can I add, as someone who's relatively new to this, that I always tell people that this is my favorite committee, and it's the place where more gets done than anywhere else. The city council does nothing compared to this committee. This is where I find out what's happening. This is where the projects get started. And I won't even say what the city council does, but it's really mostly putting out fires at best. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Are you going to quote yourself in the minutes there?
Skipping that part.
Oh, that's funny. Any other last thoughts from anyone else? I know you guys have been listening a lot. Yes, Anna.
I wanted to add something very quickly, but I also wanted to say that I didn't realize how purposefully the committee had been put together between residents and staff. That I really appreciate hearing that intentionality. It is so effective. And I just wanted to add that I think one of the things that has always really struck me is that for an incredibly detailed plan, and maybe it is because this committee exists and is sort of the living document is being upheld in that way, but it's also a very nimble plan. I mean, it did not, you know, we did not run out of things to do when the pandemic hit. There is so much in there and it touches on so many things. And I find that this committee in particular is very welcoming of new members and new knowledge and knowledge in general. And that especially is not always true for committees. And so that's been my experience, that coming into it, ideas are so welcome, input is so welcome, directional questions of, you know, how we do things is very welcome. And I think that's one of the reasons that it just keeps moving forward and kind of being metabolized in the way that it is. So I think this committee is great, very cool.
Thank you. Was there anyone else had a comment before we move on?
I'm wondering if Marlo has anything he'd like to add.
Sure. It was probably more of an update type scenario for me. Soon to be, I'll be submitting an order to the council to move our wastewater treatment plant ahead as far as improving our carbon footprint and our sludge situation. As you know, the anaerobic digester kind of fell to the wayside for many reasons, but I think we found a suitable solution for that. So that's that piece, and there's more news to come on that. The other piece is the Main Street project. I've signed a contract to design ahead to 25%. There'll be more information and much more public input to follow September, October on that as we move that scope of work ahead. So those are the two large updates. Excuse me, I'm a little under the weather tonight. Got a little colder, guys. So other than that, everything I do when I build my capital, it's funny how infrastructure travels along with the plan, so to speak. A lot of what we do is behind the scenes, but it's all about the plan going forward. So that was on my mind when I build capital, but yet we fit the needs of regulatory items, so on and so forth. That's kind of what I have for now.
Thank you, Marlo, and thanks for being here. Sorry you're not feeling at your best, but appreciate your.
I want to apologize for not making the last couple of meetings. It's been a pretty good pull. I'll just leave it there.
Yeah.
On a private note, sent my son off to Cornell last Monday. Delivered him.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Sorry, don't mean to make it personal, but it's pretty exciting.
You couldn't help yourself. That's great.
Yeah, sorry, I apologize.
No, thank you for sharing. That's great. Okay, move on. I'm checking the time, so I'm going to try to be efficient with this next item, which was something I had asked to be put on. So this is kind of a good example, I think, of one of those orphan items or something that doesn't have an obvious home. And this is about, and this derives from, this is something that's not in the transportation chapter itself, but it's under, in the implementation plan. This is goal 7 in the transportation chapter. The goal is fuel use, climate change emissions, and air pollution of vehicles will be reduced. And the particular implementation item strategy referencing is says strengthen and enforce anti-idling laws, increase public awareness about the negative impacts of idling. That is on, of course, page 250 of your Sustainable Master Plan. So back in January or February, this has been something that's long felt is important to me generally, and as a member of the advisory committee and as a member of this committee. And so I had come to the committee saying I thought this would be something to try to work on in some way, and so got the committee's blessing to work on that, and then come back with a report. And that's what I'm doing now. And I thank you for those who had sent me some materials. I got some materials from the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission as well as the DEP about anti-idling or idling reduction efforts. And what I was looking for right now, having read those and thought about this and seen, I'll mention one other thing that prompted me, the timing of this. I was watching the council meeting, the most recent council meeting, and in the acting police chief's report, it referenced, kind of as an aside, that in May, I think it was, the council had given some guidance to the police to reduce their idling of their cruisers. And as the discussion went on, it seemed clear that what had driven that request, I don't know if it was, I don't think it was an official council request, it was probably a comment by one or two councilors, but the chief had listened, and in the discussion, it seemed that, and Phil could correct me if I'm wrong, but what drove that was the fiscal concerns and, the cutbacks and how to manage with the cutbacks of the police budget. It didn't seem like it was driven by concerns about the air pollution or climate change. So this is something that it feels like it's important to find a way, find some traction with this, figure out a way to approach this. And one of the things, something I'm trying to think about in checking with you, what are strategies to move forward? Who would be entities to engage? And those I thought of as potentially Carol and her role, the mayor, the Board of Health, school department, boards of health and school departments are often engaged around this type of issue because there's so much idling around, school pickup and that kind of a thing. And also, I was wondering about is there a municipal vehicle policy or what are the practices? The same with FRTA. I was curious about that because I've, a number of times approached people who are, sitting in an FRTA bus or something like that, and it's been there for more than the 5 minutes is allowed by mass law. And when I'll talk to them, they don't say, "Oh no, it doesn't apply." They'll turn off the engine. But I don't think idling reduction plan would be me go around and be a curmudgeon and ask everybody to turn off their engines. So one of the things, just to kind of sum up before I ask for input, is the DEP suggested steps for developing an idling reduction campaign. The first one they have is identify a coordinator. And I was just wanting to say, it seems like in a way, if there isn't an obvious other coordinator, it might make sense for this committee to serve that function or designate someone. Obviously, I have a passion about this, but I wouldn't want to be doing this individually. It would be something, in service to the committee and that kind of a thing. So I wanted to try to find a way to reasonably and effectively move this forward, because a lot of things, you got to be careful. You got to, be modest in your campaign's goals and scope and that kind of a thing. So it's going to be really thoughtfully done. But I wondered about next steps. So I'll stop there and hear. Yes, Phil.
I think the SGIC taking a lead role in this is a great idea. And I think you've just volunteered yourself. I would move that George be the leader of the anti-idling campaign representing the SGIC, if anybody wants to second that.
I'll second it.
I'll third it.
I'll vote for it.
Is there? Well, thank you for the endorsement. Is there any other discussion of that? Yes, Jonah.
I think it's great. It's also, I think, only relevant for the next, short number of years. Hopefully, I think they're going to be switching over to electric vehicles. I hope sooner than later, over the next decade, say at least. And in my 1 minute research as we're talking, I see the town of Acton has a police cruiser that's an EV, and they're saving $1,200 a year in annual operating. I think that should be a part of the advocacy, is not just working on reducing idling, but how do we move quicker to getting them EVs, which are frankly a much better police vehicle. They would, I have to assume, love to have EV police cruisers.
Thanks. Kim, and then Marlo.
Yeah, I looked into this a little bit when I was in Williamsburg and found a lot of resistance from the police department, but there are a number of police departments across the country who have implemented anti-idling and installed equipment in their vehicles to allow them to turn off their engines. So it's definitely something that's been done. Pretty sure that it would be eligible for green community funding, at least in part.
Interesting. Marlo.
Yes, since I volunteered you, I would also volunteer myself, and the reason I volunteer myself to assist you is, I believe it was 2010, DPW set policy and directive on this. Working with Sandra Shields, and I was a field superintendent, so there is a little background as far as one of your departments in the city that has tried to monitor and follow this since 2010, just so you know. I'd be more than happy to dig the policy and directives up. I have them pretty handy. It might be some sort of template we can, let's say, doctor up for citywide. So I'd be more than happy to join you, George. Since I volunteered you, I feel bad.
Thank you.
I got to help you here.
Thank you. And before going to Carol, I'll just respond, Marlo. It wasn't by accident I said policies and practices, because I was aware there was some policy, but I can remember one time taking a walk and coming back to a DPW truck that was working on field somewhere or something, and I had been gone a half hour and the engine was still running. And this was a few years ago. And when I spoke to them, they turned it off right away.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's some functions, DPW vehicles can run 8 hours a day, 30 hours a day in a plowing operation. So
Yep.
Back in the fuel crunch, back in the 2010 era, we really kind of clamped down on it. Again, it was because of the fuel, but it's also was a mass general law. So there's some history there. I might be able to help.
Thanks. Carol.
I was just going to respond to some of the points that were brought up. All of our police cruisers are hybrids, and they have been for quite a while. We are in the process of purchasing all electric vehicles currently for some of our fleet operations. We respond as best we can to A, what's available, B, what's affordable and can fill the needs of the departments. And we do have a fuel efficient vehicle policy, and we're working on the state's working on kind of putting that to the next level. Unfortunately, vehicles have been very difficult. We've done really well on every front, but that's kind of the last front. But it is going to be 2035 that internal combustion engines are no longer going to be for sale, new ones, but in the state of Massachusetts. And there are going to be new rebates available for both new and used EVs, which I think that's a game changer. I just think that it's really easy to say a lot of these things. It's a lot harder to do them, and there is a lot of resistance on different things. Yeah. And we have to always make sure that whatever we implement actually works, because there's already so much opposition that all that needs to happen is something doesn't actually function perfectly, and then it takes another huge slog to kind of get back to the beginning. So I think that kind of covers what came up. Yep. And happy to talk more. But
great. I appreciate the enthusiastic response, and I want to respect people's time. And but if people want to contact me separately and offer some of the information and background information you're talking about and resources, I'd be very happy to collaborate on that together. So, and thank you for the endorsement, as I said. So we have want to move quickly to, because we're getting close to past. Hannah, teeing up part 2 about our overview, looking ahead.
Looking ahead, yeah. And we've touched on a couple things already tonight, and I'll send some sort of plenary emails in between this meeting and the next meeting. But my hope for the next meeting was to talk about kind of the shape of how we're moving forward, and just the things that I've jotted down so far. And I'm going to ask for people's input before the next meeting as well. But I think it's a good opportunity to talk about, I liked Carol's idea of maybe a top 10 priorities, what feels like sort of a check-in with where we're at and feeling at with the plan as far as priorities. MJ's not here, but I know she has talked a good bit about the downtown plan and that planning process and how her hopes for SGIC kind of interfacing and teeing that up and what's already in motion. Certainly continuing our conversation about the CPC involvement, and I'll have an update by then of some communication with Travis and talking and can bring that. Community gatherings, which I agree with Nancy very much, not only have been successful in the past, but we were sort of on the verge of some stuff with that when the pandemic hit. And so discussion, I think, about where we're at with those, obviously not, picking them up and running right away, but looking forward, virtual options, just keeping that conversation going. Projects to interface with, especially as we have new members on as well, and some projects that are kind of in motion, looking at projects that we want to be supporting. And then also guest speakers, and always continuing to have kind of an undercurrent of ideas of people that we'd like to hear from. And I just wanted to say as well that our past meetings, at least in the recent past, are on GCTV as well. And I'll share the link in case anyone wants to go back and watch some recent meetings. We do post these meetings now and going forward there, which has been awesome. And then I wanted to end with a quick question, and I know we're at times, this is probably not going to be a quickly answered question, but we mentioned tonight that, most plans do usually cover about 10 years, and we're about 8 years into this plan. And I was wondering if there is an option to renew, or does the whole process start over, and maybe talking about, yeah.
I can answer that quickly because this had come up at a previous meeting. Nancy had brought this up about, thinking ahead about funding for next one, and her recollection that there's a state requirement that it be every 10 years. And I said, oh, well, it's a planning board document. I'll run it by the planning board. And as I had an email exchange with Nancy actually today, when she was asking what had happened with that, I had tried to find in Mass General Law where that's required, and I couldn't find it. And then I kind of dropped it. But as she suggested, I'll check with Eric Twarek about that and get some context about that and get back. So
great. So that, yeah. So
Carol.
Just real quickly, I know that there is no requirement that we have to update it every 10 years. I believe the previous one is from 1974, somewhere around there. But what can happen is an update to a master plan, which might be more appropriate in this instance. And what I've also been seeing, Worcester has a fabulous plan. It's like their green plan. It's beautiful. And I've been actually looking to that for ideas, but it seems to have the same scope as and maybe a good next step, given where we are right now with the legislation that just passed and how that's kind of feeding into transportation and land use, and all these other pieces are really intertwined. See, sustainability wins. It just took a really long time for people to listen, and now that it's dire. Anyway, I know time. Yes.
Should I go quickly to announcements, Hannah, or do you have what you need for that?
Yes, I definitely do.
Very good. Are there any pressing announcements? I know I had a question Phil, you had recently announced to the group that for professional reasons, you have to miss one of these meetings quarterly. You have a conflict, and you were going to look into having someone else in the council perhaps fill in during those times. I just wondered if you had any success with that.
I have not had any success. I had someone in mind and she declined. And then I put it to the council president to see if she could get a volunteer. I think she has dropped that, but I will press her and make her do it. I'll come to somebody.
All right.
Or the next one I miss is in September, so I better move back.
Okay. Thanks. I was wondering. I figured it was coming up. All right. Thanks. Any other last comments? Is Hannah, your hand's kind of up there? Yeah.
I just had a really quick question, and MJ might be the person I have to pose this to, and I had emailed her but hadn't heard back. Has Greenfield ever considered and or pursued having a TDI fellow from Mass Development? Out of curiosity. Okay, cool.
Okay.
TDI is wonderful.
It's awesome.
I worked with a TDI fellow in Chicopee, and it was fantastic. So I don't know if that's a possibility, but would recommend.
Nice.
Highly recommend. And she's a friend of mine, and she's always asking me if we've ever done it. And I was like, I'm gonna find out.
Ooh, Andrea?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, she's great.
So cool.
So some of us, I'm sure, have no idea what you're talking about, but we don't have time to find out. So we'll.
Okay. All right. Ooh, mystery. I'm gonna add that for next meeting.
Thank you.
I'll share that. Yes.
If there are no last thoughts, again, Greta and Kim, great to have you here, and take a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Don't move.
Second.
All right. Assuming there's no discussion, all in favor? Aye. Enjoy the rest of the evening, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you
you
all
all.
so much.
Glad you could join us, Nancy.